What if everything you knew about your family was a lie? Evelyn Whitaker was cast out, branded a fraud, and erased from her own bloodline. But years later, a sealed letter, a hidden will, and a DNA test shattered the illusion that held her family together. This is not just a story of revenge. It's a journey through betrayal, buried secrets, and the quiet power of truth. When Evelyn returns to the mansion that once locked her out, no one is prepared for what she brings with her. My name wasn't on the slide, but my code was on the screen. They called it fresh thinking during the Monday strategy meeting. The whole room clapped. Well, almost everyone. I sat 3 seats from the end, silently gripping my pen, as Mallory Penn clicked through slides I had built from scratch. The font was mine. The predictive logic was mine. The charts showing regional consumer behavior shifts based on weather data, all mine. But in the bottom right corner of every page, her initials gleamed in silver bool. MP. When the applause settled, someone from the tech team muttered, "Brilliant insights, Mallory," and that was it. No mention of Evelyn Monrose. The lights flickered a bit as the projector shut down. Victoria, my sister, stood near the head of the table, arms crossed in her navy power suit, eyes glowing with approval. "This is what Monroe Analytics is about. Disruption, intuition, and bold talent," she declared. Mallory beamed under the praise like she was born for the spotlight. Maybe she was. Or maybe she just learned early how to stand on someone else's shoulders and smile like the view was hers. I stayed seated while others filed out. One by one, polished shoes and quiet laughter vanished down the glass corridor. The leftover scent of bitter coffee and ego clung to the air. I picked up the stack of used cups and half-crumpled napkins from the conference table, habit more than obligation, and caught my reflection in the wall-length window. I looked like part of the decor. Beige blouse, dark slacks, polite smile, half-formed but fading. No one noticed me. Again. At my desk, I pulled open the middle drawer and reached for my black notebook. Its corners were worn soft from years of silent battles. I flipped past notes no one ever read, margins filled with code fragments, marketing hooks, outlines of projects that others now claimed. I turned to the back and began writing. Phase 1. Document everything. I wrote it in block letters. From the far end of the office, the sharp hum of the printer started up again. Someone was printing color posters, probably for the upcoming investor luncheon Victoria wouldn't let me attend. Not because I didn't belong, but because my presence, she once told me, muddled the narrative. I was the narrative. I was the original daughter who didn't fit into the image she crafted. As I scrolled through my archived drafts, my cursor stopped on one dated 4 weeks ago. Predictive model V3_final_final EXV. I opened it. There it was, my logic, my annotation, even a line of embedded metadata that carried my digital signature. I didn't flinch. I simply selected the file, encrypted it, and sent it to my secure backup address with a one-line subject, ownership proof private archive. That same hour, a soft knock brushed against the edge of my cubicle. Joanna Burns from accounting peeked in, hesitant. "Hey," she whispered, her eyes shifting sideways. "I'm not supposed to show you this." She slid her phone toward me. On it, an email thread was open, half redacted but clear enough. A photo of me cleaning the whiteboard during Friday's meeting had been attached, captioned, "When nepotism comes with a mop." One reply read, "At least she's good at cleaning up Victoria's messes." I didn't look away. I didn't even blink. I didn't laugh, Joanna murmured. "I know," I said, voice steady. "Thanks for showing me." She nodded and backed away. I stared at the phone screen long after she left, letting the words burn their way into something useful. That photo didn't humiliate me. It validated what I already knew. I had been erased, quietly, efficiently, like I never mattered. But they forgot one thing. Silence wasn't the same as surrender. That night I stayed late. The office was nearly empty, just the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional metallic groan of the HVAC kicking in. Outside the windows, the Seattle skyline shimmered under a fine mist, but inside Monroe Analytics, the only sound was the tapping of my fingers on the keyboard. I wasn't working. Not exactly. I was archiving, cataloging every version of the presentation, every timestamp, every comment left in the margins by me and later overwritten by Mallory. I cross-referenced them, exported them to PDF, uploaded to a cloud drive no one else had access to. The file name was simple, evidence_1. When I closed my laptop, the air felt different, thinner, heavier, expectant, like the building itself was holding its breath. The next morning I arrived early, earlier than usual. I needed space, time to breathe before the noise began again. The office was half-lit, shadows spilling across desks like sleepwalking memories. I stopped by the break room to grab water. 3 interns were huddled in the corner, whispering too loudly to be innocent. Their laughter stalled when they saw me. No greetings, just the same empty expressions I'd grown used to. One of them fumbled to hide their phone screen. I didn't bother asking. In my inbox, a new company memo had arrived. REQ3 team, recognition, outstanding contributors. I already knew my name wouldn't be there, but what I hadn't expected was this: the Data Innovation Award for groundbreaking work in predictive market modeling had gone to Mallory Penn. Beneath the bold letters was a quote from Victoria: "Young minds like Mallory's are the future of Monroe Analytics." There wasn't even a footnote, not a thanks to the team, not a single acknowledgement, not even a lie. I sat there, back straight, hands folded in my lap. Lucian passed by. For once, he didn't look away. His eyes met mine. Still no words, but no denial either. An hour later, I walked to the vending machine, not because I was hungry, but because I needed a break from pretending. I slid a crumpled dollar into the slot. It spat it back. I tried again. Same result. The third time, it took the bill, paused, then froze. Lights blinking, selection buttons dead. I stood there, hands still hovering, until my fingers curled into a fist. It wasn't about the machine. It was never about the machine. You don't break from the earthquakes. You break from the hairline fractures no one else sees. The quiet dismissals, the polite exclusions, the way people say your name like it's an inconvenience. Back at my desk, I found something waiting for me. A plain folder. No label, no note, just sitting squarely in the center of my chair. I opened it. Inside, the printed version of my original slide deck, not the one Mallory altered, mine. Intact, every chart in place. But in the bottom corner of each page, a new watermark had been added. MP, printed that morning, 2 hours before the award announcement. I checked the printer logs, confirmed the time. Someone had prepared this long before anyone clapped. That was the moment I stopped feeling erased. They weren't just erasing me, they were replacing me. And I had let them. Until now. I sat down, opened a draft email, and attached the scanned file, sent it to myself under the subject Contingency, Phase 2. Then I wrote just one line in my notebook. They gave me coffee, I'll give them fire. The last time Victoria cried in front of me, we were 17 and standing in the kitchen at 2 a.m., barefoot, her mascara smudged after failing her economics exam. I stayed up all night rewriting her paper. She got an A. I got silence. That memory surfaced the moment I watched her fake a stumble and spill scalding coffee down my lap in front of half the executive team. The way she gasped and covered her mouth, then giggled. Still your favorite, right? Was a performance worthy of an Emmy. People laughed. Not all of them, but enough. I didn't react. Not then. I stood there, coffee soaking through my dress pants, burning but not screaming. I looked her in the eye and smiled, just enough to confuse her. Then I walked out of the room, slowly, upright, unapologetic. In the restroom, I locked myself in the last stall and stared at the spreading stain on my thigh. A vivid scarlet, hot against my skin. I pressed my hand to the metal wall and breathed. This wasn't an accident. This was the final warning. But what Victoria didn't know, it was also mine. I cleaned myself as best I could, changed into a pair of backup leggings I kept in my locker, and returned to my desk. No one said anything. No one even looked. A new email was waiting in my inbox. Subject: Congratulations, Mallory Body. Please join us in welcoming Mallory Penn as the new Director of Data Operations. That was the role I'd spent 9 months designing. The structure, the workflows, the mentorship documents, every system that made the transition seamless was my work. And now, just like that, it was hers. Beneath the announcement, a quote from Victoria: "Young women like Mallory are the future of Monroe Analytics." Not even subtle. I closed the email without blinking, pulled up my personal cloud, opened the security footage from the elevator lobby. The angle was perfect. Victoria's approach, her smirk half a second before the spill, the calculated trajectory of her step, crystal clear. I uploaded the footage into the encrypted folder marked Public Disclosure Stage 1. Then I added a second file, mentorship_logs_final, PL. Every comment, every correction I made on Mallory's drafts, her revisions in my handwriting, meeting notes signed by both of us, date stamped and archived. No one could say they didn't know. Later that evening, Lucian dropped a sealed brown envelope on my desk. No explanation, no eye contact. He walked away. Inside, an HR complaint form already signed. Anonymous, but the wording was unmistakable. An incident involving targeted aggression and humiliation in a professional setting. No names, but it didn't need them. At the bottom, a note from HR, handwritten, filed under review. That night I sat in my apartment wearing an oversized sweatshirt, a cup of tea gone cold beside me, surrounded by silence. Not the kind that aches, the kind that listens. I pulled out a shoebox from under my bed. Inside, old family photos, torn envelopes, one faded picture of me at 10 holding a science fair ribbon. In the corner, Victoria stood with arms crossed, not smiling, not proud. I used to think I was invisible because I wasn't good enough. But that night, staring at the woman in the photo who would become me, I realized something far simpler. I wasn't invisible because I lacked value. I was invisible because I refused to shrink, because I didn't perform my worth the way they wanted me to. So I created a new folder on my laptop, contingency plan active. Let them think I was quiet, because I didn't know how to fight. What they didn't know, I had just begun. The next morning, I skipped the elevator and took the stairs. 12 flights. I didn't stop. I needed the burn in my calves to match the heat simmering beneath my skin. When I pushed open the stairwell door into the office, the air was already thick with staged energy. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking too loudly, forced laughter echoing from the marketing pod, the script of a normal day. I walked past the reception desk. A new poster had been hung overnight beside the mission statement. Victoria's face, mid-laugh beneath a glowing caption, "The Monroe Women, Vision, Legacy, Leadership." I stared at it for a moment, wondering how long it took the design team to Photoshop me out of the original image. In my inbox, another memo awaited. Subject: Leadership in Sync, internal feature body, celebrating the bond between sisters who build together. Attached was a full-page press release. My name was mentioned once, in the photo credit. The image was from a holiday mixer last year. We were both smiling, though I remembered distinctly I had just been told to step aside in front of a client. I wasn't smiling, not really. That was the moment I knew. They weren't just erasing me, they were rewriting me. By mid-afternoon, another message pinged. Subject, strategic vision, client proposal. From Marcus Ruiz, Denver office. Hey, T, quick Q, was. This analysis structure yours? Feels familiar. He'd attached a proposal template, formatted differently, rebranded slightly, but unmistakably mine. The model structure, the data segmentation tiers, the predictive matrix, identical, except the credit at the top, read, prepared by Mallory Penn and Victoria Monrose. There wasn't a single line acknowledging me. I opened the document metadata. My watermark was still buried in the base layer, date stamped, unaltered. They hadn't even bothered to scrub it. I stared at the screen for a long minute, then closed the laptop. It wasn't just theft anymore. It was erasure in real time. That afternoon, the company hosted its quarterly town hall, an all-hands event. Cameras were set up, name tags printed, boxed lunches arranged neatly on a table near the windows. Everyone filed into the auditorium like it was a pep rally. Victoria took the stage in her signature blazer, voice smooth, rehearsed. "We are entering a new era," she declared, built on transparency, trust, and transformation. I sat in the back row, quiet, listening. She continued. "This company was founded on the belief that family isn't just about blood. It's about shared vision. It's about rising together." I tilted my head slightly. Family, shared vision, transparency. When the Q&A portion opened, I raised my hand. A beat of silence followed. "Yes, Evelyn?" she called, the smile tightening at the corners. "Could you clarify?" I asked evenly. "When exactly was the last project you and I co-authored?" A hush fell across the room. The air shifted, even the sound tech turned his head. Victoria blinked, just once. "I'm not sure that's relevant," she began. "It's relevant to the article published this morning," I said, "and to the proposal sent to Denver yesterday." From the front, a junior developer hesitated before speaking. "Didn't Evelyn design the Cora model?" Someone from the tech team nodded. "Yeah, we beta tested it back in October." Then Lucian stood. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I can confirm the time-stamped files," he said. "The source material belongs to Evelyn Monroe." No one clapped. No one laughed. They just listened. And in that moment, I realized I didn't need to scream to be heard. I just needed to speak when the silence became unbearable. The knock came just after 11. Not sharp, not tentative, measured, intentional. I didn't need to ask who it was. Only one person in this city knocked like they had nothing to prove. Dorian Wexler stood in the hallway outside my office, dressed in a tailored black suit, no tie, eyes steady. It had been months since I'd seen him in this building, longer since anyone here knew we were married. "Boardroom," he said quietly. No explanations, no greetings, just that. I followed. As we walked, the building shifted. People hushed. Someone stood from their desk and pretended to fix a printer jam. Another pretended to type, but no one dared speak. The air carried the weight of something coming undone, of something long overdue. The doors to the boardroom were already open. Inside, Victoria was seated at the head of the table, flanked by two executive assistants who looked like they had just been told to smile and not move. Helen sat 3 seats down, spine stiff, hands folded like prayer on the polished table. Lucian entered behind me, nodding once but saying nothing. Dorian placed 2 folders on the table, one in front of Victoria, one in front of Lucian. He spoke with precision. "Transfer of controlling interest, effective immediately. Monroe Analytics is now majority owned by Wexler Holdings." Victoria laughed once, short and hard. "You bought us out. That's your revenge." "No," Dorian replied. "It's my correction." She stood, barely masking the tremble in her fingers. "This is absurd. You don't know the first thing about what this company stands for." He looked at her. I know exactly what it's become. Lucian opened the folder in front of him, scanned the document, and gave a single nod. It's legitimate. Victoria turned toward Helen. Mother. But Helen didn't move, didn't blink. She stared at the far wall as if watching something only she could see. That's when I stepped forward. I pulled a small USB from my blazer pocket and inserted it into the console connected to the projection screen. No words, just a single click. The screen lit up. First slide, the internal email chain, where I was referred to as diversity window dressing. Second slide, the Denver client proposal with my original model, repackaged under Mallory and Victoria's names. Third slide, the security footage of Victoria's coffee accident, captured from the lobby angle, showing the deliberate pivot of her wrist, the pause before impact, the smile. Last slide, white text on black background. If silence protects the abuser, let noise redeem the truth. No music, no narration, just truth, exposed. Mallory, seated quietly near the back, sank into her chair, her face in her hands. Lucian turned to Victoria. Do you have anything to say? She opened her mouth. Nothing came. Dorian looked at me. I nodded. He straightened, effective immediately. Victoria Monrose is removed from her role as Chief Strategy Officer. An audit of all internal communications, authorship claims, and compliance structures will begin today. Victoria's voice cracked. You're doing this now, in front of her? Dorian didn't flinch. You did this to yourself. You just didn't expect anyone to say it out loud. When the room emptied, I remained behind. So did Helen. She hadn't said a word, not even when the screen went dark, not when the lights flickered. She simply stood by the window, eyes fixed on the skyline as if it could tell her something she didn't already know. I walked to her, stopped just behind. You said once I was too soft for this world, I said. She didn't turn around. I wasn't too soft, I continued. I was just quiet enough to outlast it. She finally spoke, her voice barely audible. You look more like your father these days. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because I was starting to wonder if the man who raised me had ever been my father at all. I left the boardroom, not as a victor, but as someone freshly unburied. The building felt different now. Quieter, more watchful. My heels clicked against the marble in a rhythm I hadn't heard before, as if the silence was no longer pressing me down, but making room. Back at my desk, a single item waited in my inbox. A forwarded message from Lucian. No subject, no body, just an attachment. It was a digital archive file labeled H_Monrose_records restricted zip. I opened it slowly, my heart pacing in a strange, measured way, like it already knew what was coming. Inside were 6 documents. Internal HR memos from 15 years ago, one flagged private, not for general record. The most recent had a note from Victoria to HR. Evelyn Monrose. Recommend internal role shift for narrative control. Narrative control. I clicked on another file, a medical intake form from a private clinic in Bellingham. Patient, Evelyn M. Monrose. Date, April 12, 2007. Age, 18. Diagnosis, emotional dysregulation. Suspected inherited patterns. Under attending physician, Dr. E. Hale. The name struck me like cold water. I had never heard of a Dr. Hale in our family circles, but something about it itched. I ran a background trace, publicly available data only. It didn't take long. Dr. Richard E. Hale, Ph.D., Behavioral Genetics, formerly of the University of Washington. Left academia in 2008. Last known address, Taos County, New Mexico. My mind darted back to something Helen once said in passing when I was in college, after I asked about our family health history. You don't need to worry about your father's side. There's nothing useful there. I had assumed she meant medical irrelevance. Now it felt like a mission. Or protection. Or both. I minimized the screen and reached into my bottom drawer, pulling out a faded folder marked Personal Do Not File. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside, my original birth certificate. It listed my father as Michael Monrose, Helen's late husband, founder of Monroe Analytics, but the ink was strange, bolder than the rest, different typeface. I tilted the paper under the desk lamp and saw the faintest mark, an outline around the name, not a fold, a lift. It was a replacement overlay. I grabbed a pair of tweezers from my drawer and gently tugged. The top layer peeled off like dry skin. Beneath it, Father Richard E. Hale. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I stared. There it was. What my life had always lacked, not just truth, origin. And someone had buried it under layers of paperwork, legal smoke, and silence. I scanned the page, encrypted it, uploaded it to the contingency plan folder. Then I printed a copy, folded it once, and slid it into the inside pocket of my coat. As I zipped it up, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He never stopped asking about you. Jay. I froze. Jay. Judith. That name had shown up once, scribbled on the back of an envelope Helen accidentally dropped in the recycling bin a decade ago. I remembered it because it was circled, underlined twice. And now, whoever Jay was, they were watching. I typed a response. Where is he? The reply came instantly. You'll need to come to Taos. He's gone. But not everything is. I stared at the message. The cursor blinking felt like breath. The father I never knew was dead, but the secrets he left behind were still alive. The air in Taos was different. Thinner, drier, but somehow heavier too. I arrived just before dusk, when the sky bled orange and mauve across the low New Mexico mountains. The rental car climbed the dusty path off Route 518, weaving past the kind of nothingness that only made silence louder. There was no cell signal, no sound but gravel under tires. The address led to a modest adobe-style house tucked behind a grove of junipers. The structure was simple, with fading terracotta walls and a tin mailbox that read, Hale, in sun-warped black letters. I didn't knock. The door was already ajar. Inside it smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Bookshelves lined the walls, heavy with journals, law books, and psychological manual. A pot of cold coffee sat on a table, cluttered with yellow legal pads and a small analog recorder. In the center of the room stood a woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed, skin tanned by years of desert sun. She looked at me like she'd been expecting me for decades. "You're her," she said. "Evelyn." I nodded. "You don't look like him, not really, except the eyes." She motioned to a chair. "I'm Judith. He asked me to give you something. Sit down." She slid a wooden box across the table, not locked, but worn smooth from being touched too often. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a folded stack of letters tied with blue ribbon, an old Polaroid of a man I didn't recognize, tall, lean, with eyes like mine, and a thumb drive labeled for E. "Your father," Judith said, "wanted to tell you himself, but when he got the cancer diagnosis, he knew he wouldn't get that chance." I took out one of the letters. It was dated June 5th, 2007. "Evie, you were never a mistake. They took you from me, not because I was dangerous, but because I threatened their version of the truth. I let them win. For a while. But not forever." My hand trembled, not from fear, but from something colder. Recognition. These weren't just words. They were the shadows behind my childhood, finally given shape. Judith watched me, her expression unreadable. "They told him you'd been placed with an adoptive family, that he had no legal standing. He wasn't perfect, but he spent years trying to find a way to reach you." "And Helen?" I asked. "She was the architect of it all," Judith replied. "Michael wanted a child of his own. Helen couldn't conceive again. She arranged the papers, had you registered under their name. Rich couldn't fight the system, not without risking your safety, so he stepped back." I stared at the Polaroid again. He stayed close, she added. Moved to Taos after a while, practiced quietly, never remarried, said he'd wait as long as it took. My throat burned. Why now? She gestured to the recorder. That drive has audio logs, patience sessions, some legal memos too, and one file he recorded the day he found out he was dying. Said it was for you. Said you'd come when you were ready. I nodded slowly. I don't know what you plan to do, Judith said, rising from her chair. But whatever it is, don't do it out of hate. Do it because truth deserves air. Outside, the sky had darkened into a velvet bruise. I stood by the car, the wooden box pressed to my chest, and looked back once. In the quiet, I heard it, the echo of a voice I'd never known, leaving behind words he never got to say. And I swore then, if my life had been stolen by a lie, I would spend the rest of it making sure no one else held the pen. Back in Chicago, the city felt louder than I remembered. The noise didn't come from the streets or the trains, but from within me. Every heartbeat a question, every breath edged with purpose. I sat cross-legged on the carpet of my apartment, the thumb drive from Taos plugged into my laptop, waiting for its secrets to load. The files were neatly organized by date and subject. Some were labeled case notes, others affidavit drafts, and then one simply titled, For Evelyn. I clicked play. At first, there was only silence. Then, his voice, low, tired, but steady. If you're hearing this, it means I never made it to the end with you. I'm sorry, Evie. You were born into a war you didn't start. But if you're listening, then maybe you're ready to finish it. He spoke of the deal made in 1990. How Helen, desperate to preserve her marriage and social standing, agreed to take in a child not biologically hers. How Michael Monrose, wanting a legacy, accepted the deception. And how Richard, my real father, was silenced with a restraining order, fabricated through twisted psychiatric evaluations, his credibility dismantled. Then came the name of the notary who had overseen the falsified birth certificate. Celia Maris. I paused the audio, opened a search tab, and found an obituary. Deceased, but survived by a daughter, Naomi Maris, still practicing in Cook County as a notary public and probate specialist. I picked up the phone and dialed. Naomi answered on the third ring. Maris Notary Services. My name is Evelyn Monrose, I began. I think your mother signed something she wasn't supposed to, something that altered my entire life. A pause. Then, you'd better come in. Her office was tucked in a quiet building off South Wabash. Naomi Maris was a woman in her 60s, thin, gray-hailed, eyes sharp as ice water. She didn't ask for eye instead. She pulled a thin folder from a locked cabinet before I'd even sat down. My mother told me before she passed, Naomi said. There was one document she regretted notarizing, a name redacted, a man erased. She kept this copy, said the girl would find her way eventually. Inside the folder was a scan of my original birth certificate, the unaltered one. Beneath it, a letter from Celia. To the girl this concerns. I was wrong. I knew it when I saw how the mother avoided eye contact, how the man didn't speak. I certified the lie anyway. I hope you find the truth I helped bury. I scanned the document, emailed it to myself, and asked Naomi to notarize a declaration of authenticity. As she signed it, she looked up. Whatever you're planning, you've got the fire for it. Just don't let it burn you too. That night, I stared at the wall above my desk, where I'd pinned photos, documents, and now, this letter. Strings of red thread connected names. Helen, Michael, Richard, Judith, Naomi, Celia. A web woven in silence now unraveling. I knew the next step. The Monrose estate was hosting a private memorial for Michael's birthday, an annual gathering of investors, board members, and family. This year, Helen would be there, and Vanessa, and the legal team. I RSSP'd anonymously. The email went out at 10:24 p.m. sharp. Please note, a formal statement will be made regarding inheritance, transparency, and bloodline legitimacy. E.M. I sat back, breath steady, heart thudding like a drum. Let them feel the dread I carried for decades. Let them wonder what I knew, because this time I wasn't the secret. I was the reckoning. The funeral was held at Rosewood Chapel, a stone cathedral in Evanston, often reserved for dignitaries and the old money elite. It was overcast, the kind of gray sky that turned the stained glass dull. A valet opened my car door with the kind of detached courtesy taught in training. No one recognized me, not yet. Inside, everything smelled of lilies and calculation, rows of pews filled with solemn suits, hushed whispers, familiar faces, some aged, some frozen in time. Vanessa stood near the altar in a tailored black dress, pale but poised, flanked by two attorneys. Helen sat in the front pew with gloved hands folded over a rosary, an act. Michael's portrait towered above the casket. Silver hair, calm smile, manufactured legacy. I walked in from the back, each step deliberate. A soft gasp echoed from somewhere to the left. They were already reacting. My name wasn't on the program and my seat wasn't reserved. But I made my way down the aisle and took my place in the empty pew directly behind Helen. She didn't turn, but I saw her shoulders stiffen. The minister's eulogy droned in the background, an ode to leadership, philanthropy, and vision. None of it was real. I didn't come to mourn. I came to speak. When the minister opened the floor for words of remembrance, I stood. Whispers spread like wildfire. "My name is Evelyn Monrose," I said, loud enough for the back row to hear, "and I was not invited here today, but I belong here more than most." Helen half-turned, eyes flashing with restrained panic. Vanessa's hand flew to her chest. The minister faltered but stepped aside. I walked to the lectern and placed the folder I'd brought on top. I didn't read from it. Instead, I looked directly at Helen. For 33 years, I lived under a name you gave me, a story you wrote, but that story wasn't true. Silence thickened. "You told me I was your daughter," I continued, "but you lied. You falsified documents. You erased a man's name from my life, my father, Richard Hale, and replaced it with a fiction, and meant to protect your husband's pride and your control over an empire built on secrets." Vanessa began to rise, but an older man beside her pulled her arm down. I opened the folder and held up the notarized birth certificate. "This is my truth, and I will no longer carry your lie." Gasps. A few people stood to get a better look. A reporter, someone with a press badge, snapped a photo, his phone trembling in his hand. "I'm not here to cause a scene," I said calmly. "I'm here to claim my name." Then, gently, I placed a sealed envelope on top of the casket. He wrote to me. "Your husband, the man who thought he was my father, he knew the truth before he died. And he left these words for the right moment." This was that moment. I stepped down, my pulse steady as the storm I'd summoned. As I passed Helen, she turned to face me for the first time. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. The color had drained from her face. I whispered, just loud enough for her alone, "You don't get to write the ending." And I walked out. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves swirled near the chapel steps like something long buried clawing its way free. I stood there for a moment, not in victory, but in stillness. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is silence breaking open, and sometimes the most powerful truth is the one they never saw coming. As after the funeral, I sat alone at the Sycamore, a quiet cafe nestled in a tree-lined street just off downtown Evanston. A place I used to visit with my mother before I knew who she wasn't. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books, and for a rare moment, I allowed myself to breathe. I hadn't even touched my coffee. It had gone cold, like the home I'd once tried so hard to belong to. The envelope Michael left behind weighed heavily in my bag. I hadn't opened it. Not at the funeral, not outside the chapel steps. Some part of me wasn't ready to hear what he might have known or admitted. But as dusk spilled across the window panes, I finally unfolded it. His handwriting was unmistakable, neat, commanding, impatient even on paper. Evelyn. By the time you read this, I imagine the damage will be done. Truth has a way of carving through legacy like wildfire through dry fields. And you, well, you were always the spark. I knew. Not everything, but enough. Enough to know that Helen feared you, that Vanessa hated you not for who you were, but for what you could become. I let them twist you into something manageable because it was easier than protecting you. I regret that. I stopped reading, heart clenched. There was a letter once, from Richard. I destroyed it. I wanted to believe it was desperation, not truth. But after your mother died and Helen changed, I started to question the story. I saw the coldness in how they handled you. I saw your loneliness and I said nothing. I watched you disappear into silence. I thought discipline would make you strong. All it did was make you a ghost in your own home. A tear splashed onto the paper, smudging ink. If I had done right by you, truly, you wouldn't need this letter. I don't expect forgiveness. I just ask that when the dust settles, you don't let them turn your anger into their redemption. You're more than what they tried to erase. It ended there. No signature. Just a final, wavering line drawn across the page like the last breath of a man too late to fix what he broke. I folded the letter back and held it to my chest, not for sentiment but to mark the end of an era. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in me said answer. "Miss Monrose?" a calm voice asked. "This is Angela Tran. I'm a legal associate at Wexler and Booth. I believe we have a situation regarding the Monrose estate, and your name has been raised in connection with a contested clause." I sat upright. Contested how? There appears to be a secondary will, sealed, dated a year before Mr. Monroe's passing. It was scheduled for release only under certain conditions, conditions which your public statement at the funeral has now triggered. Silence fell between us. "Are you saying there's another will that mentions me?" "Yes, Miss Monrose, and it names you as a beneficiary, pending verification of paternity." I nearly dropped the phone. Angela continued. "If you're willing to proceed, the firm is required to conduct a formal review, including medical documentation." "You'll have it," I said, almost on instinct. "I have the birth certificate and the notarized affidavit. Then we'll need you in our Chicago office tomorrow morning, 10 sharp. I hung up, hand trembling, not from fear, but from the sudden shift of gravity. I had walked into that funeral with a name and a truth. Now I had leverage, and for the first time, the Monrose family would be the ones with everything to lose. The courthouse on Madison Avenue was older than I remembered. Marble floors dulled from decades of footsteps, wood-paneled walls carrying the echoes of verdicts long since passed. But today it was mine. The bench I sat on smelled faintly of lemon polish and stale paper, but I didn't mind. I was early. I wanted to watch them enter. Through the slit in the heavy oak doors, I saw Vanessa pacing just outside, phone to her ear, dressed in a sharp black sheathed dress that clung like armor. Her expression was brittle. I didn't need to hear the words to know she was trying to control the narrative one last time. She wasn't going to win. My attorney, Gwen Harris, arrived minutes before the session. She was brisk, professional, and exuded the exact brand of cool composure that Vanessa hated. I liked her instantly. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly, eyes scanning the hallway. "I was born ready," I said, "even if they tried to rewrite that birth." Inside, The courtroom was half empty, but the tension hung thick as molasses. The judge presiding, Honorable Marianne Klein, was known for her sharp legal mind and zero tolerance for theatrics. Perfect. The proceedings opened with the reading of the original will. Predictable. Everything to Vanessa, nothing to me. As always, the story they built excluded me from the start. But then Gwen stood. Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to submit a supplemental document. Executed, notarized, and sealed under directive of the deceased, Mr. Michael Monrose. She handed over the folder. Judge Klein's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly. Is this the secondary testament referenced in last week's discovery? Yes, Your Honor, along with supporting evidence. DNA test results corroborating witness statements and an affidavit signed by the late Dr. Miriam Bexley. Vanessa's face drained of color. She leaned forward, whispering furiously to her lawyer. I didn't look away. I wanted her to see what it felt like to be the one blindsided. The judge read in silence for a long time, then spoke. This document stipulates that Evelyn Monrose, born March 12, 1990, is the biological daughter of Michael Monrose, conceived out of wedlock and raised under an alternative identity due to familial intervention. Furthermore, it outlines her right to inherit equal standing, if not controlling interest, based on intent to amend prior legal oversights. The courtroom murmured. Vanessa stood. This is fabricated. That woman, she isn't— Ms. Monrose, the judge interrupted. Sit down. Vanessa's fury was palpable, but what came next silenced even her. Gwyn activated the courtroom monitor. On screen appeared a dated video. Michael Monrose, seated at his study desk, recording what looked like a private confession. If you're watching this, Evelyn, then I failed. I failed to protect you from the very people I once trusted. Your mother, your real mother, tried to tell me. But I was weak. I believed in keeping peace instead of telling the truth. Helen told me you'd destroy everything, but all you ever did was survive. The image flickered and then went dark. Gasps echoed. My heart thudded, not from grief, but from release. The judge called for recess to verify the video's metadata, but I knew it was over. No more shadows, no more secrecy, just the truth, laid bare like bones in sunlight. I stood to leave the courtroom briefly, needing air, but as I pushed open the doors, a voice stopped me. Evelyn? I turned. Judith. Her face was drawn, hands wrung tight. I didn't know about the video. I didn't know he'd left you that. I'm not here for apologies, I said evenly. I just wanted you to know, she whispered. There's one more thing he left behind. Something private. It's in the safe in his old office. He said only you would understand when to open it. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The reckoning wasn't done yet. 3 weeks after the courtroom fallout, the Monrose estate stood eerily quiet under the early morning haze. I parked just beyond the stone gates and walked the gravel path alone, my footsteps the only sound besides the occasional rustle of wind through the pines. They had all scattered. Vanessa disappeared into some boutique consulting firm in Connecticut. Judith moved out of state to live closer to her daughter. And the staff? Gone, after decades of silence. I wasn't here for the house. I was here for the name. Inside the study, the same room where my father had recorded that final confession, I approached the wall safe Judith mentioned. It was hidden behind a faded painting of a fox hunt, just as I remembered from childhood. The combination? A guess, but not a hard one. March 12, 1990, my birth date. The lock clicked. Inside, a single envelope sat beneath a small metal box. No jewelry, no stocks, no cash, just legacy. I opened the envelope first. A letter dated 3 days before his death. Evelyn, If you're reading this, it means the truth has already cut deeper than I had the courage to let it when I was alive. You were always the mirror I couldn't face, but you were also the only one who ever saw me clearly. This house was never a home, and the name Monrose was never meant to be a weapon. I've arranged for the majority of my liquid estate to be transferred into the Sophia Foundation, named not for lineage but for wisdom. You will decide how it's run, what it stands for, and who it serves. Make it count. I sat in the leather chair, folding the letter neatly in my lap. The metal box held documents, legal deeds for properties I didn't want, and a birth certificate. Mine. It listed my mother's name, Miriam Bexley. I whispered it like a prayer. Outside, the sky began to lighten. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what that house held, because it didn't hold me. Later that day, Gwen met me in the office of our newly incorporated foundation, the Sophia Trust. She laid down the final paperwork with a half smile. It's official. The assets are in. Vanessa didn't contest the transfer, because she'd have to admit everything in public to do it. Exactly, Gwen said. And Judith? She sent flowers, no note. Gwen arched an eyebrow. Symbolic or cowardly? Maybe both, I said. I spent that afternoon walking the city, downtown, uptown, nowhere in particular. I passed a church where I used to sit as a teenager when the house felt like a coffin. Its doors were open. I walked in. Inside, the light filtered through stained glass in soft blues and ambers. I sat in the last pew, not to pray, but to breathe. A child giggled somewhere near the altar, and a mother hushed him gently. Life was moving on, and so was I. I left a copy of the letter from my father folded beneath the chapel's visitor book. No name, no signature, just the words. Blood made me theirs, but truth made me free. As I stepped outside, the sky had shifted into late afternoon gold. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by who left me behind or who pretended I didn't exist. I was defined by the choice to step forward, with no revenge left to take, no apology to wait for, only the future. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story was not just about betrayal and bloodlines. It was about reclaiming one's voice in a world that tried to silence it. Evelyn's journey reminds us, the truth may take years to surface, but once it does, it demands to be heard. To everyone who's ever been told they don't belong, this was for you. Until the next story, stay brave, stay free.